Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, January 13th, 2017.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We're looking at a very busy weekend in the NHL. But, Russ, you wanted to start off with something?
Yeah, there was a little discussion I caught the tail end of on Twitter between Ranger fans. They were talking about Ryan Gropp. And some felt like, well, he shouldn't have gone back to Seattle for his, at 20 years old. Again, with that old story, what could he possibly do there to develop? Mm-hmm. And so now they're acting as if, well, he's not having the greatest year, so it's stunting his development. And it's like, the Rangers made the right decision. He may have looked okay in camp, but the idea is he's 20 years old. Mm-hmm. So let him go back to the WHL. I mean, he's got 26 points in 33 games. Is it the greatest year? No. Does that mean that he's finished as a draft pick, as a prospect? No. But people act now as if 20 years old, if he's not performing in juniors, then there must be something wrong and he's not going to be good. He might get hot in the second half of the season and you might eat your words. Like, just sort of leave it alone. It's one of these things. So then I also saw the usual, well, I wouldn't have taken him. And I'm like, hey, I wasn't really debating whether it was a good draft pick for the Rangers, right? There was Jeremy Bracco on the board. There was Jonas Siegenthaler. There was Jansen Harkins. There's so many Harkins. There were so many guys. Gropp certainly wasn't on my radar for them to pick. Brandon Carlo picked a few picks ahead of him. I'm sure they were looking at him, But again, Daniel Sprong was on my list. He was after. There were definitely guys. And I'm sure I would have been – if they would have asked me to make the pick, it would have been between like Sprong and Bracco. That's the reality. But the reality is they got Gropp, and you can't say, that a 2015 draft pick looks bad and looks like the wrong pick and looks like the wrong guy on the board. It's just way too soon for this kind of talk. Yeah. What if he takes till he's 22, 23 to make it to the NHL, and what if he does become a really good NHLer? The idea of him sending him back was because he didn't have a complete game. So do you want him to round out his game anywhere but juniors? I wouldn't. I mean, I'd want him back, and that's the place to do it.
Well, I mean, and Toronto faced this with a number of players this year, one of them being Adam Brooks, who they drafted as an overager, who scored like 150 points with Regina last year. And he was 20 years old when he came to camp, and he had a decent camp. But it was like, okay, do we want this guy to be the fourth line center on the Toronto Marlies with, all these veteran sort of like dead money and Colin Greening and Brooks Lake and all these guys? It's going to be hard. He's going to be hard pressed to get ice time. Or do we send him back to Regina, who right now looks like a team that's going to probably be in contention to come out of the Western Hockey League for the Memorial Cup? They're probably the favorite because they're one of the top-rated teams in the CHL, and he's the second leading scorer in the WHL. So, I mean, would you rather have him sitting on the bench in the AHL or fighting for ice time or playing first-line power play, first-line minutes? I mean, it makes sense to do that rather than have him, maybe graduate a little early to a certain level and not play.
Right. Right now, it just seems like this has become a popular point of contention with fans and clubs, and this is a good way to sort of jab it at the team and say, well, they're not doing the right thing. And again, we're talking about somebody who's 20.
Right. Now, it's fortuitous that you bring this up because in writing our Rumor Buzz column on Hockey Buzz, there were some sort of plotting out where teams were going to go, especially the Canadian teams, for the deadline from TSN's Frank Cervelli. And one of the teams he was talking about was the Vancouver Canucks. And you saw the Canucks last night play the Flyers. I want to talk about the game first, but then I want to go back to a player. It was a 5-4. Was it overtime or shootout? I know it was 5-4 shootout. Won by the Flyers. Claude Giroux with the game-winning goal. But this game was a little light on defense, from what you were telling me.
A little. There was no defense.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that can, for the fan, that can be entertaining. For the coach, I'm sure he was less a few hair follicles at the end of the night.
Yeah, although there was only one goal in the third period, which was odd considering how many had been scored before. It was just a weird game. There was no way either team could lock it down, but I didn't think Steve Mason played bad enough to pull him, and I disagreed with like the radio that said, "Oh, well, it was great that Dave Haxtell had the guts to pull him and bring in Neuwirth." I mean, look, Neuwirth did okay. There were plenty of times where they could have scored on him too. He was just fortuitous in the fact that when they brought him in very quickly into that period, they got a goal that tied it up. That had nothing to do with changing the goalies. So I don't know what they're going to do for the game. I guess they're playing the Bruins coming up. I don't know what they're doing for that one. But the idea is I didn't think that was that big of a deal that they changed Mason. I don't think that would have mattered. And look, nobody changed anybody for Vancouver. Ryan Miller stayed in the entire game. And I'm going to tell you, this is one of those games where when we talk about nowadays, well, you got to stand on your head and what – I got to tell you, with no defense, Ryan Miller did everything he could to win that game for his team. He was fantastic. He made so many great saves. I can't even tell you, but when it's shot after shot and breakdown after breakdown, nowadays you can't – a goalie cannot do it by himself. But I got to tell you, somebody's going to want Ryan Miller because he played great.
Yeah, and he's always played well against Philadelphia. Going back to when he played with the Sabres, he's always played well against them. But to that point, and these teams are both in sort of similar circumstances because, I mean, I think it's stupid that Vancouver is going to make a playoff run. I think they should rebuild, but the ownership or whatever, they're hell bent on that team competing and contending for a playoff spot.
Right.
Jim Benning came out during the week, I think it was a couple days ago, and said we're not trading any draft picks. So, but that doesn't preclude them from being a buyer at the deadline if they think they're close. But they're all like Philadelphia. They also have pieces that they may want to sell. I mean, with Philly, it's Streit. With the Canucks, it's Miller, it's Burrows, it's one of their defensemen, Philip Larson. I mean, they're all UFAs. I mean, this is a difficult job for Benning and for Hextall to compete for a playoff spot and sell at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, this is what teams go through now because fans almost dictate it because of the way ticket prices are, and that's fine. So there's always going to be teams that are going to say, hey, we're in it, but we're rebuilding, but we're doing this, but we're doing whatever. Whatever your plan is, that's fine. Most don't have the guts to say that we're just rebuilding like the Leafs did. But even now the Leafs are, fakely in the playoff hunt. So they're not going to say, well, we're not going to be in it. No team will do that right now. So that's fine. I mean, the interesting thing, and I'll switch it, I got anticipated line combinations from Mark Roseman. He put up the sheet for the Ranger game. And Jesper Fast lost 8 pounds this week because of the flu. So I don't think he'll be on this, but AV hasn't spoken to him yet, which again is just like, come on. I mean, if he's lost 8 pounds, are you really putting him in this game? Like, what is this sub,
Yeah, Vino just doesn't want to get a cold. That's why he hasn't talked to him. He doesn't want to speak to him face to face.
I mean, why have a pregame anything with a coach if they're not going to be honest about players playing, right? So, okay. So we don't know if Fast is playing, but here are the lines. Kreider, Stepan, Zuccarello, Grabner, Hayes, and Miller, VC, Lindbergh, and Nash. Now, I'm going to stop it there because that one does not make sense to me. Mm-hmm. I don't see that one making sense on any level. I don't know why all of a sudden you pushed Rick Nash to the third line. This is what, I'll get into another subject in a minute because it was good conversation. But then the fourth line is Buchnevich, Puri, and Fast, and it'll probably be Rivik instead of Fast. And then defensive pairings are pretty much the same. McDonough, Shea, Holden, Girardi, Clendening, Klein, because, Stahl's still out.
Right. Let me just go back to make my point about Vancouver because the thing that Cervelli talked about was, the UFAs, will they move them out? I think they're going to try to do that delicate balance between, move one of them out and then try to get somebody back without trying to, mortgage the future too much. And a guy who's 20 years old, who was a high first-round pick And if you look at his statistics in the AHL, and I'm not saying they should go out and trade him because his value is at its absolute lowest right now. But if you're talking about somebody who might be off of their radar and they're willing to move at the deadline to get something that will help them make the playoffs, do you think Benning is going to move Jake Virtanen? Because he's got 7 points in 30 games in the AHL. He doesn't – I mean, he's only 20, but it doesn't seem like he's making any progress.
I don't think he's moving him, though. I think it's not all about scoring with Jake Virtanen. It's about playing physical, skating well, creating energy. And so he's had injuries. Maybe that has sort of thrown him off course a little bit. But just like Ryan Gropp, he's only 20. If they rushed him, they rushed him. But either way, I don't think they're trading him. So I don't think that's going to happen. I don't get that feeling. We should mention Henrik Sedin's 3 points now away from 1,000. So somebody mentioned that to me on Twitter yesterday after we talked about Crosby. And the only difference is that Crosby played 468 less games. But, but who's counting?
That's 5 seasons worth.
I know. But Henrik Sedin is still a great player. I mean,
I'm not kidding. Now I wonder how far Daniel is behind him because, wasn't Henrik the one who had the 1 year he got hurt and Daniel played.
Yeah. But I think Henrik's always been the higher point guy. I don't know that for certain.
He's the center. Daniel's the winger, so that always makes sense.
Yeah, so that would make sense. Here's another thing. So as we talk about. When I was talking about Rick Nash on the third line, it's come up recently. Hey, how come Eric Stahl looked so good in Minnesota when he looked so bad with the Rangers? He was a -7 in the playoffs. And look, did I expect Eric Stahl to have a complete resurgence? No. But I knew when Eric Stahl went to the Rangers, and we talked about this, when he wasn't put on the top line, right. I knew there was a problem. I knew that AV was probably asking him to play a complete 200-foot game, which Eric Stahl is not known for, and that definitely threw him off. He never got on the top line for more than like a game or two.
Right.
He was mainly playing on like a third line, which he's doing to Nash now. And like none of this makes sense. It's like, look, I get that you have a system. Boudreau is not doing that with Stahl, so clearly he's getting the most out of him, and I give him credit.
I mean, maybe the factor here with Nash is the fact that he's coming off a groin injury and he doesn't want to lump too much ice time on him in his first game back, and he's maybe easing him in. I mean, if he's going to keep him on the third line for game after game after game, then I think that's a disservice to Nash. But
yeah, I just don't even know if it's good for him now, just simply because you could have him on the second line and just limit his minutes. It doesn't matter where you put him. I think you should be putting him with players that, he is used to playing with VC. But Lindbergh, he's not that used to playing with Oscar Lindbergh. I don't know if, that's the problem is I don't think there's going to be much magic there. And that's where, you would hope for, look, in this game, and we could preview this game anytime you want, the Leafs are a good, fast team in the sense that they're going to put a lot of pressure on the Rangers defense in the offensive zone. The Rangers will do the same to the Leafs, and the Leafs defense might be overmatched for that. But you've now basically, I would say, eliminated a lot of what Rick Nash could do to the Leafs by putting them on the third line. I think in a way you've helped the Leafs by doing that.
Yeah, it all depends on what matchups Babcock wants. When we can talk about this right now, I guess. But yeah, I mean, they're probably going to try to match up the Kadri line against Derek Stepan's line, or the line, I mean, against whatever they deem as the best offensive line for the Rangers. Now, strangely enough, and I wrote about this.
Well, it's going to be Stepan, Zuccarello.
Yeah.
That's their top line right now.
It'll be Komarov
and Kreider.
Yeah, Komarov, Kadri, and Nylander against that line, which the matchup that's Nylander against one of those guys, he's very, very good offensively, but defensively he's still not a mature player. And it was funny because
Kreider and Kadri will be what you want to watch, because Kadri will be doing everything he can to get Kreider off his game, and Kreider is a very physical player, and so I expect to see some fireworks between the two.
Well, and the funny thing is both of these teams are coming off the 5-day bye week.
Right.
Strangely enough, everybody, we talked about this earlier in the week about the Leafs goaltending situation, and they traded Enroth and they sent Bebo down and they bring in Curtis McElhinney, and Babcock yesterday said, well, we're going to play McElhinney one of the 2 games on the weekend, but he said that the last 2 back-to-backs and played Anderson both games. This time, they play at Madison Square Garden tonight and in Ottawa tomorrow. That's a division game. That's, do I think that the Senators are the easier of the 2 opponents? Probably, but it's strange that they're going to use the backup in the second of back-to-back against the division opponent. I would have thought if they were going to split it, they would have gone with McElhinney, who's played against the Rangers a bunch of times, in his first game, and just get it out of the way and give Anderson that extra day of rest now rather than, it's a little strange. I mean, I can't.
They're going for the bright lights effect. It's MSG. It's New York. They're putting their best in. Babcock wants to, go with this playoff charge. So you have to beat the Rangers now to prove to everybody, including me, that you're on this playoff charge. If you lose this game, then,
well,
we're talking a different tune probably.
They have the most games remaining in the NHL right now. They're them and the Islanders are the only teams that are under 40. So they've got like 1 to 4 games in hand on everybody in the league right now. But they'll use those games up pretty quickly as other teams get their bye weeks, and I think they play 4 or 5 times this week. Yeah, and in that bye week, the Leafs have fallen 4 points behind Ottawa. Florida's passed them. Tampa's tied them. They're 6 points behind Philadelphia. So you've got all these teams that have not been stopping, have gained points. Now they got to sort of return serve here and answer that. And if they lose 1 game on the weekend, they lose 2 games on the weekend, then they sort of fall behind. So it should be interesting to see how that young team in Toronto handles it. Now, moving on to a couple other games. Interesting, and I watched a little bit of this game last night. The Senators beat the Penguins 4-1. Now the Penguins, I played the night before, and I cannot remember who they had played against. Let me just see. The Capitals. They played. That's right.
It was a big NBC game.
Yeah, they played the Capitals on. So and they lost to the Capitals 5-2. So. Matt Murray's first start, and Senators win 4-1, and Mike Sullivan gets booted in the third period for I guess verbal abuse of an official. I mean, right now this team, they're making the playoffs. They're well positioned, but now the goaltending stuff comes back now that both of them are healthy. In terms of, do they trade Fleury? Do they not trade Fleury? And you look at that lineup, though, the forwards are great, but Letang's been in and out. Derek Pouliot was playing with Scranton Wilkes-Barre against the Marlies, so he hasn't grabbed the job. Their defense was no name last year, but got them to win a Stanley Cup. This year, I don't get that feeling out of that no name defense, Russ.
No, but they also have David Warsofsky in the AHL 1 Player of the Week, and he's ripping it up offensively. At some point, I think he'll get back up. He hasn't been back up yet, but I think they're probably waiting until they see the best out of him, and they'll put him back up. I think they're giving Pouliot as much play as they can before they finally say maybe he's just not what we thought he would be.
I mean, I'm starting to get that expansion draft vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a guy. Okay, if we have to, because you're gonna protect Letang, you're gonna protect Mata, you're probably gonna protect. Oh, let's see, just to look at their roster right now. You're gonna protect Letang, Mata, and Ian Cole. You're probably not gonna protect Trevor Daley because since he's a UFA, maybe you protect Justin Schultz. But if you protect Schultz or Cole, you're leaving Pouliot exposed. And unfortunately, that's a 7th overall pick who just has never really come through. And
it's just the way it is. I mean, it does happen. He is playing, but he's just not the offensive defenseman they thought he was. That's all.
Now, when we mentioned Stahl earlier, the Wild opened up a can of whoop ass on the Montreal Canadiens.
Yes, they did.
Now, the Canadiens had won again with this the schedule. They had won in Winnipeg on Wednesday. They had won 7-4 against the Jets. They come into Minnesota, second of back-to-back, play Price. Now I think they played Montoya against the Jets, and it was 4-0 after 2. And the controversy was, at least I'm watching this game, and after the game, Brian Boucher, one of the commentators from NBCSN, was saying he couldn't believe how that Therrien didn't yank Carey Price. But take into consideration what has happened this year, the hubbub about not pulling Montoya in that 10-1 game against Columbus, and then the stink eye that Carey Price gave Therrien when he pulled him in the middle of the game. Came out this morning that Therrien went to him and says, do you want to be pulled? And he said, no, let me stay in. So this, he went to him, he offered it, and he said no. So there should be no problem here. So I think sometimes we create controversies out of nothing.
Yeah, I will give Therrien credit. He has been communicating well with the goalies, and so we in the media shouldn't try and make it worse. I give Therrien credit for that.
Now, a couple other notable things last night. Taylor Hall makes his return to Edmonton. The infamous Taylor Hall Adam Larson deal from the summer. First time Taylor Hall, first overall pick, goes back to Edmonton. Excuse me. And it was a 3-2 overtime victory for the Oilers, but the return was marked by an elbow. And not an errant elbow, a purposeful elbow from Taylor Hall to the bugle of Zach Kassian. And Kassian was not too pleased. He went after Hall, and Hall sort of turtled because he's not a fighter. But, it's – I still, I'm not going out on a limb here. Taylor Hall's still not happy that he got traded.
No, it's not a good split. But they've lost both games in overtime, right? So you kind of feel bad for Taylor Hall, who's not been able to really – get any revenge out of it. Look, Zach Kassian gets under everybody's skin, so this is something that shouldn't be a shock, and you don't want Taylor Hall to fight, really. So, hey, it's one of those things, when guys get traded, sometimes it's not a good breakup, and this wasn't.
Yeah. I just want to look at a couple of the teams that I think are going to be involved at the trade deadline. We had a minor deal today, and we'll just talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Cody McLeod, and I guess you could call him one of the few enforcers left in the league, traded from the Colorado Avalanche to the Nashville Predators for Felix Girard. Don't know much about him. I know he's a
low-level prospect that is a decent skater, but he's not going to be a big impact guy. He's just a depth guy.
Yeah, had a year. This was the final year of his contract. I think it was his entry level, and RFA at the end of the year. So essentially it was a salary dump, the first of many that are going to happen with the Avalanche. McLeod was under contract for another year, making about $1.3 million, and the Avalanche retained salary. And that's okay. They were not retaining salary on anybody else. So, you can do that for 3 players. It's surprising that they used that on a guy like Cody McLeod, because that's not a big salary.
But I think
those are very strategic. You use those only when you absolutely have to.
Well, I think the issue is that they felt the roster spot was more valuable than the player, and so right now that was a way for them to get somebody else in on the team right now and get rid of a dead spot, lose some cash, shed some salary. So I think it's a good move. Again, not a big deal.
Yeah, he's the first one they're retaining funds on. They had a buyout of Brad Stewart, but in terms of retaining salary, that's the first. So they can do that for 2 more players. And one of the guys I think they will do that on is Jerome McGinley, because Jerome McGinley, I'm sure there's a contending team that would want to bring him in as a support player. But we're talking $5.3 million.
Yeah, so they're going to have to retain some money to get like a draft pick and maybe like a really good prospect.
Yeah, and maybe a guy like John Mitchell or a Feder Tootin who's making $2 million. I mean, I don't know what the market for Feder Tootin is going to be, but the thing is, right now, I mean, there will be a rental market for a defenseman, and then there will be a market where teams are trying to get young defensemen out of teams, and that's what I want to talk about here. But I mean, I think a guy like Feder Tootin could be moved.
Sure. I mean, and I've watched him this year. He could still play a little bit. He plays a little defense. He skates well enough. If you feel like you're a team that's going to make a deep run, he is a good extra roster guy.
Yeah. Now, okay, some of the contending teams, and we, right now we're at the halfway mark, and a lot of people are doing their analysis of teams and what they need and who they're going to go and get. And there's been a lot of talk, and I'll just go through a few teams here. Like, say, for example, the Montreal Canadiens. Elliot Friedman reported last week that Thomas Plekanec, they were, when Galchenyuk comes back, if Plekanec doesn't start to step it up offensively, they may look to deal him. I'm thinking good luck with that, with his salary. I think it's $6 million. I don't know who's going to take him, but that they may look to deal him. But they're also looking for a center. They're also looking for a top 4 defenseman. They're looking for what everybody else is looking for. But Russ, when you look at that team, if I'm an opposing general manager and I'm, say, John Chaika from the Arizona Coyotes, and I've got Martin Hanzal, and they want Martin Hanzal, what do you think the first 2 names I'm saying? One is Juleson, and the other one is Sergachev. But I don't think Bergevin is going to trade those guys. So where's there a deal going to be made?
I don't know if there's a deal that's going to be made. I think this is a situation where they're going to end up making a very minor deal or signing someone on the scrap heap. Fleischman's still out there. Maybe bring him in and give him a look. I mean, I don't think they could do much more than that without losing some big talent like that, and I don't think they could afford to lose that. So, maybe someone's interested in Zach Fucale. They don't seem to be interested in him, so maybe they could get some depth player for him. So some team could shed some salary at some point.
It seems that their future goaltender prospect, the one that they're interested in developing now, is Charlie Lindgren, and not. I mean, Fucale's in the ECHL and played in the Spengler Cup. So, now and similar situation with Boston. I mean, Boston may be looking to add a defenseman to help them now. Maybe looking for forward help, and we've heard the Landeskog rumors.
Yeah,
but again, anybody calling Don Sweeney, the first 2 names are going to be McAvoy and Carlo, and
but they'll get off of that. Like they have enough guys where, again, they have so many. I mean, we've been through the list all these days, but at the end of the day, if they feel like they need a defenseman, they probably could trade Ryan Spooner and get a team. A team can get a depth. They can get a depth defenseman from a team. Right. Now, is that better than like Rob O'Gara? Maybe, and maybe that's all they need to do. I don't think it's going to be any kind of big earth-shattering trade. I don't get the feeling with a lot of these teams it's going to be any kind of earth. I don't think we're even going to see earth-shattering trades. I think we're going to see some last-minute salary dumps because teams are going to realize they're out of it and they're going to take what they can get. But guys like Bishop's going to stay. He's not. I don't think he's going anywhere. Maybe we see Ryan Miller get traded. Maybe. I mean, but there's not going to be a lot.
Well, is this a concern for the NHL? Do they want teams to have flexibility to make trades? Because
I don't think they care. I mean, I don't think they care if Hockey Buzz does well on trade deadline day. I don't think they care about the trading deadline.
They would have to care if 2 of the rights holders, TSN and Sportsnet, who build their network around one day.
I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that you have X amount of teams that are still in it. So you're selling tickets because the NHL is a gate-driven business.
Sure.
And so they're relying on that. And I think that is more important to them than everything else. And right now, there's only like 5 teams that you would say that aren't in it.
I'd say 3. Well, I'd say 3. Right.
Great. So
right now, Colorado, Arizona, and maybe the Islanders.
Yeah.
And if the Islanders win 3 games in a row, they're right back into it. But now, I mean, I mentioned Landeskog. I mean, there had been some rumors out there regarding the LA Kings and Landeskog, and I'm like, I look at the LA Kings situation, and I don't know where, unless they're trading one of their defensemen.
That's the only place I could see it because they do have depth in that position.
Where? I mean, is Braden McNabb going to replace Muzzin or?
They've been able to do it before. I mean, he's not going to replace Muzzin, but they've been able to rotate guys in and out of that defense core and get through it. Again, when push comes to shove, I don't think they're doing that much. I think they're going to rely on guys like Carter and Gabrick to drive the bus when Quick comes back. And I think they're going to play it very tight to the vest with the way Sutter will like to play a defensive system. And I don't think they're going to do that much to upgrade. I think they'll be looking for a deal for teams that just want to move guys because they want to save some salary, and then maybe there'll be a deal to be made, but they can't take on that much salary either.
Well, I mean, it's intriguing, and I look at the LA Kings roster, and just trying to like formulate what could be the potential framework of a deal if they were going to go after Landeskog. If you look at their roster right now, I mean, Dustin Brown is, I think, an overpaid player right now. Gaborik, I think, is on. He's got maybe a year or two left. He's injury wise, I think he's declining. Maybe he does what you were saying he will do and show up in the playoffs, do like a Claude Lemieux. But I look at their situation right now, and Tyler Toffoli, who's a very good player, signed a 2-year bridge deal. He's making $3.25 million. He's an RFA at the end of this year. And this could be a Brandon Saad type of situation where they know that they can't sign with Doughty making the money that he's making, with Quick making the money he's making, and now Kopitar with the $10 million plus contract that he's making. How can you pay Toffoli? They're in cap jail right now as it is.
They'll do a bridge deal because I think Gabrick's deal is up in a couple of years.
No, he signed a long extension. And the thing is,
What's a long extension? How many years?
He's got 4 more years at $4.75 million. So and Toffoli already did the bridge deal. He already did them a favor. Yeah. So I mean, at a certain point, his selfishness kicks in. He's like, I want to get paid.
Yeah, but he doesn't have control, so it doesn't matter. I mean, the Kings will do something to shed some salary in the next couple of years, but to get the Toffoli problem under control, they probably will just sign a bridge deal. I don't think they're going to be able to do anything else. I think they have very loyal players, the same as the Rangers, and the Rangers have been able to get guys to do the bridge deals and then still get them under contract a few years later. A lot can happen in a couple of years that we don't foresee, injuries, whatever, buyouts. So I'm not worried about it for them.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the motivation might be there to stay in LA, because if you can stay in LA, it's like Kucherov wanting to stay in Tampa. It's like, you want to be in Winnipeg in January? No, you'd rather be in Tampa Bay. But
you got to remember too, Toffoli's only got 20 points this year. He doesn't have 58 like he did last year. He's not on pace for that. He only has 8 goals. He's not on pace for 31 goals. So he doesn't have much bargaining power at all.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but I'm just looking at the situation where I think even if he has an okay year, he's built up enough of a resume that
you know how these arbitrations work though. He's a young player. He's only 24. The only thing he could say is he's had double-digit goal years every year, but it's 12, 23, 31, and then 8.
Yeah,
that's not enough to really be able to drive the bus there.
Now, another interesting team is Anaheim, and I keep going back to them because whoops, hello.
Hold that thought. I'm going to take her out.
Okay. The Anaheim Ducks right now are leading the Pacific Division with 54 points. They've scored 115 goals. That was before they scored. They won 4-1 last night against Colorado. They're on the top at the top of the division. They're going to make the playoffs. They've got their goaltending in place with Gibson. Their defense is stacked. I mean, to the point that they have excess defensemen that they can potentially move somebody out. But scoring-wise, it's all Getzlaf, Perry, and to a lesser extent Kessler, and then Silfverberg. They really do need more scoring, and that's the thing. I think Anaheim is situated better than most in terms of they need to add one more scorer, and they've got what a lot of teams are looking for. And in a way, they can pick and choose who they want. If they, right now, and just strictly the expansion situation, I think they're going to end up buying out Kevin Bieksa because he's got a no-move clause. So, right. So if they go and protect 7-3-1, they're going to expose a Dupre, a Josh Manson, in expansion. I don't think they want to lose.
I don't think they care about exposing Dupre.
Well, Dupre's been injured, so probably not. But Manson's only 24, 25
They
years
don't care about exposing Manson. I don't think either.
You don't think so? I mean, I know
there's so many terrific. You're talking about. Am I worried about Manson when there's Theodore and Montour and other guys? No.
Larson and I mean, but
Gabriel Carlson, right? I mean,
do I think they would
Gabriel Carlson. Larson is the other guy. Yeah, Carlson's on.
Do I think they would rather get something for one of these guys rather than losing them for nothing in expansion? That's where I'm going. I think they're going to have to give up something to get that offensive piece that they really need to maybe have a chance to come out of the West. And if they do that, it probably comes at the cost of one of the defensemen, but not one of those, not Fowler, not Vatanen, not Lindholm. They might have to sacrifice a Montour or Theodore, and I
think they probably will. I think that's a possibility, and they'll look for someone like a Ryan Spooner caliber or better, and that'll be the kind of deal that gets struck up, or maybe that'll be the deal that they do for Iginla. Like it'll be something like that.
Now, one last team here, St. Louis. They look like, right now, they're only 2 points ahead of Nashville for third place in the Central. We've got a half a season here, so it's not critical. But they're not doing as well as a lot of people expected. They've had some injuries. But again, the question that continues to linger there is the goaltending. And there will be goaltenders out there at the deadline. But they're
not going to make a move on goalie. They're not.
I mean, see, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like, okay, I know that you traded assets to get Miller. That didn't help. Then you went with Elliott and Allen, and you tried to get through that way. That didn't work. Now you've given Allen the job, and it's not working. You're not going to go back to Miller again. You're not going to trade for Ben Bishop, who started in your organization. Probably, So there are places they can go for a goaltender, but really, it seems like they're spinning their wheels there, Russ.
I don't think they're looking at it that way. I think they're just looking at it like, let's just get in the playoffs. When they get in the playoffs, they know they have a certain kind of team, and they're going to just grind it out with everybody else. Hitchcock is, basically, do I think it's his last season in St. Louis? Yes. Do I think it's his last season in hockey? No. And so I think they're just going to ride it out with Allen here, and they're not going to do anything crazy. They're not going to try and supplant him unless there's an injury. Because clearly they've had plenty of time to use Jordan Binnington, and they haven't. So that's not in the plans for Ken Hitchcock, at least.
Right.
Now, it could be for the next coach. And so I don't think they're going to make a move for a goalie. I think it's staying exactly the same.
Well, Elliot Friedman said something interesting about Dallas on one of his Sportsnet radio hits this morning. And if you think about it, I think he's right on target. Jim Nill, we all look at the Dallas situation. We know that the goaltending is below average, especially for the almost $11 million they're paying them. Mm-hmm. But he looks at his core group. He looks at the young guys that they have on the blue line that are developing. He's got, Sagan and Ben, who are in their 20s. He's got young defensemen. He's got Klingberg. He's not under a lot of pressure to win absolutely now, go completely balls out and make a trade, go and get Ryan Miller, try to win the Stanley Cup now because he's got time. And those goaltenders, they have another year left in their contract. Now, maybe in the summer they buy out one of them, so they create some room to go out and get Ben Bishop or go out and get somebody else. But there's no real impetus right now to go and make a drastic move to bring in the goaltender or make that, to bring in somebody else. They, in a way, could even be sellers. They could trade Patrick Sharp at the deadline, or do that. Yeah. So
I don't think they're going to do that, although the possibility exists. And I heard that they, want to upgrade the goaltending for Lindy. To me, I think they need to get rid of Lindy. I think after this year, this will be the sign that they need to go in a different direction with Lindy and then still upgrade the goaltending, but then maybe call Valerie Nichushkin and say, hey, would you like to come back? We've got a different coach now, because that has hurt him. Having him not there, we don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
But that's a big body who could skate, who has offensive potential, who basically left the team.
Yeah, and we've gone over that point before.
Yeah.
Thing is, though, if they don't go out and get the goaltender for Lindy now, maybe it's Nil saying we'll go out and get you that goaltender next year, and we'll give you one more year. I mean, if that's there are some changes that they Sharp is on an expiring contract. Could you see him go back to Chicago? It's like that's like every time I see like Ladd last year. I could see Sharp, they're looking for a top 6 forward. If Dallas has, accepted the fact that they're not in the race, and right now I think Ben is out with an injury, but they're not that far out of it. But if they fall out and then all of a sudden Sharp becomes available, at least that's a known commodity to Stan Bowman that he knows he will work in that room. Maybe that's a direction that Chicago goes back to.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you lose the coach in the offseason, you could probably get Nichushkin back, who has 16 points in 26 games. Like that's, he's almost got 10 goals already. Last year, he only had 9 all last year. He's 21 years old, so you're getting a big body back. Then you can make a change with goaltending. Like that's, to me, more of a change that you can make than just getting Lindy a goalie and seeing where that goes this year. I don't have much hope for that. I have more hope that if you change the coaching, you can bring one of your better prospects back and get him playing with whatever new coach there is. Then your lineup has gotten better. You added depth. You maybe lose Patrick Sharp. That's fine because he's lost a step anyhow. Right. And then you could still change the goaltending and be a contending team. I think that, to me, is the right way that I would go.
And if you have a young, progressive coach who can work with young players, maybe you bring Nichushkin back. Maybe a guy like Guryanov comes up from the AHL. Maybe he's ready to play in the NHL. And then you've got a couple young Russian players that you can give you secondary scoring behind Sagan and Ben. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, I think that's the hope. I mean, Guryanov was one of the better guys in the World Juniors. I like that plan better. That plan will never happen under Lindy.
No, it won't. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like, Lindy's been there, I think, 3 years.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's enough.
At the end of the day, what is the difference between Lindy Ruff and Jeff Fisher? I mean, Jeff Fisher finally did lose his job.
Yeah.
But what is really the difference? I mean, you could say Lindy has more wins. He maybe got a little further. But what really is the difference?
So you think the 2-year extension, if Lindy Ruff gets one right before the end of the season, that's the death knell for him?
Yes.
God. Do you okay? Well, just to end the show, do you care to make any NFL predictions?
Well, I'm going to go for Green Bay over Dallas. That's my biggest upset. Even though, is that an upset? I don't know. Aaron Rodgers is playing better than any quarterback in football, and I don't know if I trust the young talent in Dallas. Even though they have a great offensive line, I get it, but I don't think.
I don't dislike either team, so I'm just going to watch. All I know is that they've delayed they're going to delay the start of the Pittsburgh-Kansas City game because of apparently some freezing rainstorm in Missouri. So that's
all right. Let's talk about that for 1 second. This used to be a league that played under any circumstances, and then 1 year they decided we can't play when it's a potential for lightning anymore because obviously lawyers got involved, insurance policy. So now they can't do that. Now they can't play in freezing rain. Are you kidding me? This is football. Like,
hey, they played in rain in Bakersfield in an AHL outdoor game, which we didn't talk about this week. I don't know how the hell did they continue that game? How did they play that game?
I guess it said on the ticket, rain or shine. I don't know. I mean, it's.
But come on. I mean, there was video of somebody taking a slap shot from his own zone, and it was like a waterfall came up.
Yeah, it's crazy, but they got through it, and so whatever. I mean, they did. At the end of the day, though, with the NFL, and I'm only going one more upset. I think Kansas City's going to beat Pittsburgh. I think Roethlisberger, he walked in the press conference with a boot on.
Yeah.
He's going to be immobile. I like the Kansas City defense. I think Andy Reid's done a really good job there. I know he was much maligned here in Philly, and that's fine, but he's got a good team there. He's got a quarterback that knows exactly what to do, just enough to win a game, and they've got great special teams, and Eric Berry is one of the best guys in a defensive backfield in all of football. And I think at the end of the day, if Roethlisberger can't move out of the pocket, because that's his big gift, if he is fumbling, lumbering, they're going to have a problem.
Well, I'll say this. if Giselle Bundchen was quarterbacking the New England Patriots, they would beat the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even talking about that game. There's no point even discussing that game.
So
it won't be a game.
Okay. Well, thanks, Russ. I hope everybody has a happy weekend. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.